Okay, we are back. And next up is capital improvement plan.
So as you're aware, well, let me back up one moment. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide with the real information in it. The page numbers there, 90, 91, that's the beginning of this section in your budget. And those are the actual printed page numbers. So you're going through the document, sometimes with the PDF, it'll show you a page number for at the top, but you're looking at the actual printed number at the bottom. So 90 and 91 are the beginning of this section. So these are the larger projects that we schedule on a 5-year basis and beyond. The ones we need to plan for in advance because they're greater than $100,000 and we know what they're going to have a great effect on the budget. Of course, as we get into a particular budget year, as they stay on schedule, they will move into the budget year. So these are the projects that for this fiscal year 2014, the budget we're considering now, have moved into the budget and are part of what you're considering. So with those, and I'll point out that it's going to list the department that is put that in as a project, although there may be multiple departments working on it. In fact, with Camp Tia and Spencer Park at this point, it's more in general services for project management, but it was initially submitted by Active Living and Parks. The funding source is also listed. In this case, it's capital reserve, so money you would set aside in your capital reserve funds to pay for this, the cost, and then a page where the detailed description of this project is. So unless you have specific questions, I'll just leave you that reference so you can go back and look at those if you need to. So with Camp Tia and Spencer Park, of course, that's a project to replace Helms Hall, but we will probably be replacing more than one building out there at a time. We have been working with the Boys and Girls Club and have an architect that you've already approved for that project. It is very complicated because of the waste disposal system and siting. And then in addition, of course, we have an agreement with, for our own programs, to have programs during the summer, the very popular use of the pool, as well as Boys and Girls Club programs during the summer. So as we move through this and go through the design, it will need to keep in mind that we want to operate those programs for the summer, and construction demolition being so disruptive, we'll need to keep that as we look at the schedule. Frank List Park Tennis Court lights replacement. Again, this is in capital reserve. That was a life expectancy. They're beyond their life expectancy and need to be replaced. Robert Wallace Park, you would set aside funds for phase 1 in actually in a construction fund, and of course we've received Part-F grants for this also. We're still working on some access issues for this to be able to move forward. Cox Mill parking lot is the parking lot at the school park with Cox Mill Elementary. As we have done some construction there, we discovered deficiencies in the construction of that parking lot and it needs to be replaced. Our attorney is pursuing the original contractor on that for some compensation for this project. Emergency communication improvements, of course, the county manager has been working with this and the P25 digital conversion and our larger communications improvements, and so that amount is scheduled for this year. Coast Station in the Concord Mills area is emergency medical. We would be making a one-time contribution to include, just as we did with the city of Kannapolis, with the city of Concord building a new fire station, we would be contributing to that project, so we would have a dedicated station area for emergency medical in that area. Particularly, it would help us in high-volume areas or high-volume peak times in the morning and afternoon commutes. Prime farmland soil is a request really that's coming. Although it says planning and development, it is from the Soil and Water Conservation District. These would be match monies for additional grants like they brought to you in the past. They've identified this as one of their high priorities. J.M. Robinson wetland mitigation. There was a wetland mitigation project that was done when that school was built. The football stadium was built on some jurisdictional wetlands. That wetland mitigation project has been failing, so we've not been released from that requirement. So this money is being projected in the budget in order to go back and redo that project. And we hope this is, we went with a very high amount. We think we can do it for less, but we want you to see what could be the budget ramifications of that. The Human Services Building HVAC, again, is replacements, and that is from the Capital Reserve Fund also. And then capital outlay for the schools, which we already talked about this evening. and land for a new elementary school, capital outlay for Kannapolis City Schools, and then the capital outlay for Rowe and Cabarrus are all included. And I believe Ann told you that with Rowe and Cabarrus, they have identified specific projects for stormwater, air conditioning replacement, a solar array, and security. And again, if there are any questions, of course, you have the reference to your budget numbers if you want to look at those specific projects.
Do you know, which if you don't, that's okay, but do you know if when Cabarrus County Schools presents, will they have finished their study for this elementary school or any project? I can't remember the timeline that they told us that they would be.
I believe they're supposed to be getting the preliminary final plan here pretty soon, and I think they would be presenting to you or bringing you an update in June, late
Okay.
June.
When you get a chance, if you can just kind of verify that. I
Right.
mean, I know we've talked about this land for a good little while, and going some different ways, and we haven't done anything because they haven't been able to tell us, really. I know we've had a conversation about Royal Oaks and if that's where they wanted to go to, and, you know, really what they were looking at. And I mean, I know they're doing the study, and so we've held off doing anything until they can get their request for us, but I'm hoping that that's going to finish soon. That seems, I don't know, it seems like we've talked for an entire year about, or more, about another
And
elementary school.
Walked property
And
over
you've
the
walked,
last year.
you've walked property,
Yeah.
I haven't. You've walked to quite a few sites, I think.
These are, the next page is new projects on the list. These are ones that have been added to the 5-year, or in some, well, all these are added in the 5-year area. Some of these you'll notice is say fiscal year 2014, so they've been added this year and they are included in the current budget that you're considering. The others where it indicates a fiscal year, for instance, the new Highman lift will be, things going by schedule will be included in the budget you consider next year. So again, this is a list of those projects that have been added in, and some of those, again, we have been trying, for instance, to fix the wetlands issue, or Soil and Water has been trying to consult and fix that wetlands issue, and we finally reached a point that we felt that it needed to be more of a redesign and replacement, so it appeared in this year's budget. Same way with the land for a new elementary school, as well as the Cox Mill parking lot, which we discovered those deficiencies when we were doing the wetlands mitigation project at that park. Yeah.
The one for Rowe and Cabarrus Community College remodeling for cosmetology, I thought that they had a lease issue that was running out before this time frame.
They do, realizing that whatever you as a board decides the best way to move forward, there's no way they could have gotten it done by the time for this budget to go.
I see.
They've signed an extended lease for 18 months.
Oh, okay.
So you have a little time. We're looking at several different options, one actually being some remaining space at our Human Services Center, and then we're also looking for some other areas, and they've got a consultant looking, or a real estate agent out looking for some additional locations as well. So
So their time crunch in moving has been relieved.
it's been
by-
relieved temporarily. There is an increase in their rental payment where they are right now,
Mhm.
that goes along with that lease extension, and that's in your budget as well.
Right.
But so.
Thank you.
And of course, it is something that needs to be identified fairly soon because of the type of remodeling that would have to be done for it.
Right.
So the next page is a listing of ones where the start date has changed. So some of these have moved, and of course, there's a very extensive list that are beyond the 5 years, which is a really kind of the catch-all of the other projects turned in that have not moved into that 5-year cycle. Some of these now are beginning to move in. The elections voting equipment, as an example, is moved to the fiscal year 2017 budget. In some cases, some of these, the changes there is no submission, meaning that for one reason or another, that project has no longer been identified as a need, so it's moving out of that's what the dashes means, it's moving actually out of the CIP. I didn't know if you had any questions on any of those projects. So the grand total, and I know this is a startling number, is $269 million. There are some very large projects in the future. The county manager mentioned some of those, but the courthouse expansion, we have some potential park lands or park purchases that have been projected, as well as the construction that are very large numbers, but those would need to be, those are things that you would need to discuss. That's kind of one of those, we've had our parking lot discussions, or when you do retreats, when we get to larger projects like those are much larger discussions on when those move into our planning process. In this year, there's capital improvement projects that are in the budget are total $6.3 million. You may have heard the number. I know you heard a lot of numbers today, but a $4.2 million that's in on the 5-year financial plan. Keep in mind that's from the general fund. $4.2 million is funded out of the general fund, but the others come from either capital reserve or construction and renovation funds. We have different funding sources, so that's why you see some difference in those numbers. And then there are, from 2015 to 2018, almost $6 million in projects that are in the schedule that are unfunded. And that's where it becomes important that we continue to set aside funds into the capital reserve fund. And that gets back to a policy that the board has had to move money into the capital reserve fund, and why it is important that we set aside some of those monies so that we can fund some of those projects that are not only identified, but at this point we've actually started to schedule when those would be built.
And we'll be bringing you an update on that in June. Ann and Pam and Partha have a proposal for you to start that process back as far as contributing to the capital improvement fund.
And these are, these are county projects, does not include 250 million school projects.
Correct.
That's right.
I mean, that's it, because that's not really part of our 5-year plan. I mean, we've asked them to, both school systems, to try to get into a 5-year planning process, so we'd have a way of kind of chipping away at some of the needs. But we don't have that at this time. Correct.
Yeah, it did for this year. Yeah.
We have the list, we just don't have a prioritized list.
Yeah, we have a list that says everything in year one, but I know that we have
Pam has
asked.
pointed out
that
it includes Rowan Cabarrus Community College.
This includes Rowan Cabarrus. So the only thing that's not part of this $269 million would be Cabarrus County Schools and Kannapolis City Schools. Okay.
And again, your budget document that you each has descriptions of each of these projects. Should you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, and I can either contact the department if I can't answer it, or we'll get the information to you.
Great. Any other questions on capital reserve projects? Some that you want to know what they are specifically, or you see something, or you don't see something on there that you thought might be coming down the pike? A lot of the park projects, some of those are upfits of current parks, some of them are future parks, which we do not own property for. So a lot of that money would be actually securing property as well as construction of the park. And that's per the updated livable community blueprint plan that the Active Living in Parks Board has just had, or is in the process of having updated. If not, we can move on to the Sheriff's Department.
Does anybody have anything at this time? And we can always go back to it. So, all right, we'll call up Sheriff Riley and entourage. It's nice to have an entourage, I think.
Good afternoon. Mike, I guess we'll start with personnel. I have with me Benita Conrad, who is our finance person, and then Chief Paul Hunt. They're very knowledgeable about our budget and play a big role in day-to-day operations with our budget. So I have invited them to chime in at any point, keep me straight. As a have mentioned in years past, we operate, under the sheriff's office, we operate 3 different budgets. I'll go into personnel first and separate it out, and then we'll go in and do each of those 3 individual budgets, which would be our sheriff's office, and then our animal control, and then our jail budgets. Those are the 3 different budgets that we operate within those. I'll start out with personnel, talking very briefly about staffing analysis that was done in '09. It was performed in '09, presented in the early part of 2010 to this board. So it had already missed that budget, and there was a recommendation of a deficit of 21 officers within our agency, throughout the agency, and that was just the sheriff's office. That was minus the detention facility at the time, because we had not completed the detention facility and did a separate study for it. So those 21 positions have been put into a 3-year plan by myself and presented each time. Now, I will say that, again, it gets a little confusing because it was done in '09. All the compilation was done in '09, presented in early part of 2010, which meant it couldn't be a part of that budget. 2011 budget was the budget year. It was not presented. We didn't ask for any because we got 77 officers to open a new facility at that time. So it's been provided in the last 2 budgets, but that just kind of explains where those positions have been since that time. In the recommendations that are being made this year, you'll see that there are 11 positions that have been recommended by us and recommended by the county staff. In those 11 positions, I'll separate those out. 10 of them are patrol positions. However, there are 2 different parts in that there's been some discussion about 4 of those positions were requested by Midland. We've had discussions for many years with Midland about enhancing their police presence down there. They have requested the last couple of years, even though we were in very tough budget times, and I've recommended that, look, we try to do some other things through those tough budget times. However, I do think it is time for them to take a look at that. And they requested to you and the county manager the same type of partner agreement that are in Mount Pleasant and Harrisburg, which is a 2-2 match. And then anything beyond that is upon them to enhance themselves. So 4 of the 10 patrol positions are those. Just some of the quick hits on those 4 positions and why. I don't have to tell you some of the growth that's occurred in and around Midland with Locust and all that's going on there, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, just looking at some of the numbers, our total number of calls in comparison with Mount Pleasant, Mount Pleasant has had 4 officers down there in this arrangement for 30+ years, and even beyond that. But the numbers in Midland, even the population, just the population down there is double of what it is in Mount Pleasant. We looked at even the Department of Transportation provided traffic information about we have 2 highways in both places, 73 and 49 in Mount Pleasant, Highway 2427 and 601 in Midland. And there's about 25,000 daily commuters on the road, on those 2 roads down in Midland, as opposed to about 19 on the 2 in Mount Pleasant, just to kind of give you a comparison of those. Same thing with total number of non-self-initiated calls, which are actually someone picked up the phone, called our agency, and requested some type of service be provided to them. That has been about double in what we have been looking at, numbers inside the city limits, not just in our zone of Midland, but in the town limits of Midland for years. And we get about double, over 3,000 calls a year of those non-self-initiated calls for services in the town of Midland, as opposed to maybe 1,600 in the town of Mount Pleasant. So it's about double of that. So again, that's another reason to take a look at it and say, hey, it is. Again, the proximity of where they're located, it is a little bit out in the rural part of our county. You look at response times. Our response times down there has been anywhere from 11 to 13 minutes on non-emergency, which is not too bad, but in comparison to 6 and 7 minutes to enhanced policing in Mount Pleasant. And I think that'll greatly reduce that response times there. So those are a lot of things that drove their wanting more enhanced policing there. What that does, it does a lot of different things for the sheriff's office. There, just in looking at Harrisburg and the town of Mount Pleasant, which we've had those agreements in for years, they're a double benefit for both of us. I mean, we track total number of calls that the officers that are assigned to that town go out of the town limits and help us answer a number of calls. And we also track the total number of calls of the officers that are not assigned to that town that go into town to assist in calls with that town officer. And it's about a 50-50. That's very helpful for both of us, because if you go and look at the maps, especially in somewhere like Harrisburg, you can see that we still have unincorporated areas that are beyond their limits in a lot of different places around them, all around them, especially when you get out to Brookdale in that area. So we're still going to have the responsibility and the requirement to answer those calls out there. So it greatly enhances us to have those folks that are already out there that can say, hey, I'll take that when I'm nearby, go and take care of that. But there's just a lot of different benefits that I won't labor anymore on. But anyway, those are those 4 positions that are requested as a 2-2 match there. All right, the other 6 positions go into the staffing analysis where there was a recommendation of 8 several years ago. What this does for us is a couple things, and again, I'll just quickly hit that. That 8 will help us complete putting 2 officers in every zone, in our zones in the county now, and that takes into consideration that folks that are on vacation, sick time, you always have to build in that extra avenue there. So on a perfect day, there'll be probably 2 people in a supervisory zone where that perfect day doesn't happen but once in a blue moon. In fact, but our goal is to get 2 officers and 2 police officers cars in each of these zones. At the same time, there's not been a whole lot of discussion over the last year or so about the ICE program. If you remember, I gave you a lot of information about us implementing this ICE program to take the trips, mental commitment trips and writs off of our patrol staffs to keep those patrol officers. We have just not had a whole lot of success in getting the federal government to sign that agreement. Numbers are starting to fall a little bit, so we've had a lot of discussions about pulling the plug on that program before it even gets off the ground for a number of different reasons. With that being said, we still have looming out there this trip situation where our officers are constantly. Just to give you an example, there's 2 trips, 1.9 and some change per day that we're taking just in mental commitments in and around. That doesn't even include the amount of folks that we're taking to and from prison and different places like that, and that number is probably twice as much as our mental commitments. But we just have a high demand of those, and we have a plan in place by adding these 6 officers. By adding these additional 6 officers, we reduced it from the 8 that was recommended. And the reason we did that, just talking with Jay and Mike here a couple months ago about some different things, we decided that by putting these 4 in Midland, that would put a second person down and around that area. So we could take 2 off. I mean, we'll have to pick those up at some point down the road, but it made it easier because we're going to have 2 people in that zone now. We'll have our regular car that's there now, plus that Midland car that will be down there that we normally don't have. So by being able to do that, we took a couple off of the staffing analysis. But at the same time, I'm also trying to use those individuals for this trip person. And what we'll do is identify a person on each of our squads. We have a couple different recommendations, but the most popular recommendation and probably the most efficient is for us to take these 6, add them to squads, and force the patrol guys to identify a trip person on each patrol squad that no matter what, every single day we have a dedicated person to make trips on every single squad, and then we will change our schedule. Instead of taking the trips when they come in, and then as soon as they get back, we got another one waiting, we're going to change that schedule and do a 7 a.m. and a 7 p.m. trips. And we'll set with those individuals in between those times and just take 2 trips every single day. And we're going to see if we can make that work. That's what a lot of folks in and around us are doing with dedicated full-time trip folks. But that kind of explains the 6 and the 4 and how we came up with 10 for patrol. Our numbers, I'll tell you, for patrol, the 6 requests is not necessarily to look at it and say, wow, in the last 2 or 3 years, our number of calls for service have greatly increased, or our response times. In fact, we have done pretty good at managing that over the last 3 years. I will tell you that those changes in 2009 we were seeing higher spikes in calls and our response times. we're getting out of whack, where we pretty much have maintained those now. They're still not quite where they need to be, and what we're seeing, as I told you before, is that we're getting a lot more, unfortunately, we're getting a lot more of the volatile, high-risk calls per year, which really tasks all of your officers. And when you only have one car in each zone, and you get one of those that's a long-standing 6 or 8 hour, and you got 4 of those cars down there, then you're really suspect throughout the county. Unfortunately, those calls do not happen Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. They happen after hours and inclement weather and things like that, when we normally get those. So this will enhance our abilities to constantly keep people in all corners of the county and available for services. The 11th request is a clerk for gun permits and carry concealed weapon permits. I don't have to explain to you what has happened in that part of our society. The requests just this year we've already in just the first quarter equal to what our annual requests are. And these take a lot of time. I know it's hard to understand that someone coming in and wanting to carry concealed weapon permit seems like it's an easy process, but it's not. We have sat down and spent hours administratively going through that process and trying to chip away at it and try to make it a whole lot easier, and they have done a fantastic job within our office of getting that chip down. In fact, they just made an adjustment this year because we do appointments for folks. We get so many folks that come in and they don't understand even the demographic questions that are on the application. So we spend more time with those people getting them to correct their paperwork and waiting on them to help them spell and do this and that we started several years ago doing applications for them, because we have a lot of their data in our system, and it's a lot easier for us to take time in between them coming and us do their paperwork for them and then come and we sit down and go through a meeting to make sure that their information is correct. And what we started doing this last year is instead of doing one-on-one, we now take about 10 or 15 of those at a time, take them into a room and do a lot of those at one time, which helps mass produce those folks. We have been utilizing, we were so behind in getting these done that we're mandated for gun permits and CCWs a certain amount of time to have those produced under mandate. And we were really, really pressing that time limit. In fact, we're always 2 to 3 months out on our gun permit or CCW permits. And that is pushing the envelope. The reason is because we have so many requests and it takes so long to get those done, and there's only so many hours in a day. If you they're actually spending every single minute. We have no room to squeeze somebody in for an emergency situation or something like that for a request that comes in. We just have to put them at the back of the line, and there's no available time for that. So, and we're utilizing our cold case officer. We've been utilizing him on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, dedicating his full time to going down and helping the girls do this and that. We also have a crime analyst person that does our crime reporting and stuff that has spent, she gets a pile a week and she spends the majority of her week running the criminal histories and doing things like that. And that's what this person will do. There's at least 35 to 40 hours that are built in between those two officers a week that we'd like to pull them back, get them back to doing what they're doing, and this person would take over those responsibilities and get us where we need to be. That's a quick hit at those positions. Again, you have a staffing analysis there that goes through 21 positions over a 3-year period. I can tell you that we have spent a lot of time in the last 2 or 3 months, the three of us especially, behind closed doors looking at different things. I can tell you that by looking at that, I'm very pleased that Mike and former county manager and the county staff has told us in the last several budgets that we couldn't anticipate addressing any of this for years to come, but he has done a fantastic job of saying, look, we need to get this done, and working with us to get that done. We have looked at this thing, and I think that we can also trim a couple next year when you get this. It'll take these officers away if they're passed. But I also have identified at least 3 to 5 positions in there that we may be able to do some different things with. So we can be very, very, very close at addressing this entire staffing deficit that we've had, and a lot less than the 21 positions. So I appreciate the hard work that they've done and the dedication that they have put towards the sheriff's office and safety of our citizens.
Can I ask you a question? I just want to make sure I understand, or either one of them. In this sheet that we have up here, it says civilian telecommunicators, 6. So when you talked about the 6 officers, is that what you're referencing, that you would take 6 officers, move them to a patrol, and then you would, instead of hiring 6
Civilianized.
officers, you're really looking at hiring 6 civilian telecommunicators? And just in case somebody's listening and they think they might have a skill set for that, what are you looking for? What kind of a person is going to be a civilian telecommunicator?
Well, they don't have to go through any of the certifications. They are required to go through a telecommunicator certification, which is basic 911 school, to teach them how to operate the card system that they operate from for enhanced 911. Outside of that, it's just a matter of having communication skills, the ability to dispatch.
So this is the person that, if I called in a 911 call,
Mhm.
this is who would answer that call.
That's correct.
Make a determination of which officer to call and whatever response needed to happen, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because you said,
It's a very good question. I apologize because
No,
I
that's
didn't look
okay.
at yours, and you're right. We talked about, we're trying to totally civilianize the entire communication center, and this was a way to do that, is to request them at that rate and move the current deputies that are in there out into these 6 positions that we're requesting and backfilling them with these 6 civilians.
and that's what I understood. I just want to make sure that, because this is, anybody that would listen to this program, they might think, well, I'm not a deputy, I haven't gone through that, but these 6 positions are not deputies. You're going to move those out into the service, and you're going to get 6 civilians in there to run the 911 system. So anybody that would have those communication skills of that need might be looking towards the budget when we, presuming that we would approve those positions. So I just kind of want to clarify that.
Yep, and as soon as we get an idea that is going to happen, we need to get started on that, because we have 2 fairly new folks in our 911 center right now, and if you buckle 6, that's 8 total, and there's no way we can do 8. We'd have to kind of schedule that out a little bit, which we'll start doing now in hopes of by late summer we can have all of those completed. It's just hard to put 8 brand new ones down there. Any questions on personnel? All right, moving into our budget, and again, I'll try to hit these pretty quickly. If you've got any questions or anything on those, then feel free to ask. What I've tried to do in just a limited amount of time that we have is just try to concentrate on the things that may be different or changed or a significant change, and try to hit those for you and highlight them. If you have any questions, feel free to ask about any of those. We'll start in the sheriff's budget because it's the largest of the 3, and then we'll move into the jail budget. But basically what I like to do is show you what last year's total budget, which includes operating and personnel for 2013, and then the 2014 recommendation, and then show you what the difference is. And then what I like to do is take that difference and say, here's where I see where that difference was created. Okay, so for 2013, there was a $10,705,000 and some change. 2014 recommendation is $11,973,000 for a total of $1.2 million difference, increase. All right, so the 1.268 is, I'd like to explain to you where I think that those come from. All right, we go back to, we just went over personnel. So I have $841,000 or $840,000 of that 1.2 is in those personnel recommendations. So those strictly go back to the personnel that would fall in that budget. There's a recommendation of a cost of living raise, which I'm very appreciative of that. I think that's very wise, and that is $223,000 for this budget. So you add the 800 and 223, it gets you up over $1 million. And then with our new radio system, there's a $110,000 radio maintenance agreement that is in there. So it makes up that. So when you back out those 3 things that are very visible, you're down to about $93,000 in operating. And I want to say that when you get into our operating budget, I want to say another $30,000 or $40,000 of that is uniforms, radio equipment, things like that will go for those. But I'll go through each one of those line items in the operating budget and give you a chance to ask any questions or make any comments about those. Let's see, I'm going to switch my glasses on too, I apologize. Some of the significant changes, let's see here. In the 9331, which is minor office equipment and furniture, that is the biggest bulk. That's where we get a lot of the different things for maintaining our operations. That's where you'll see every single year we have things in there like targets and target backers and gun cleaning stuff and extra guns and shotguns. I mean, you can read down through there, pretty self-explanatory. We did request in item number 2 shotguns. There are a few more shotguns that request this year than normal because, as you can see in there, there's 30 shotguns need to be replaced, and we didn't want to get all of those at one time, so we're looking at a 2-year replacement plan. Come further on down to training cartridges for tasers at the bottom of my first sheet, $15,750. That seems like a whole lot, but for our tasers, there is a heavy recommendation for us to deploy. Each employee has to deploy at least, 2 of those, Paul?
Yes.
At least 2 of those a year, they have to deploy those. So we buy these training cartridges, and it is just a requirement for them to stay compliant with Taser. And Taser is a big tool for us. Let's see. Next item that stands out. Again, we do have 2, not full-time. Naturally, we don't have any full-time specialty services, but we do have a full-service SWAT team and a full-service bomb squad, which is very nice and has been, unfortunately, heavily used. But the equipment for those folks you see from time to time, but we can't get it all at one time. We are working on some night vision stuff now that we hadn't been night vision compliant. We do know that the Midland incident, if you're familiar with the incident we had down where at least 8 or 9 of our guys were shot at here a month or so ago, that was one of the things that got us, was the fact that just where we were out in a rural area and not being able to see, we had limited sight, and we did have night vision, but we're going to complete our night compliance. So I go to the next item is it is also outside of the life of a tactical vest. Those tactical vests are beyond the vest that we use for everyday services. These tactical vests, for a number of different reasons, are a little bit more expensive, and they're all due. So that's $26,000 just for replacing those. But they're, I think, 2 years out of compliance now, or recommendation, I should say. They're not compliance, but they're recommended. So the other thing I'll mention about that particular, again, that's a bigger bulk of our operating budget. If you look at last year's recommendation to this year's recommendation, I want you to keep in mind that there's a $125,000 recommendation in that, which is about normal for the 12, 13 budgets I've done. That's about right. But last year's budget was what, $93,000, I think. And you got to keep in mind that the request last year was $140,000. But with working through the manager's recommendations and whatnot, there was $50,000 cut straight out of that, and that's what knocked it back to 93. So basically, what I'm telling you is the $125,000 request this year is actually less than the request last year, and it's some of the things that were cut out of that last budget. So it's not like it's 30 or 40,000 greater than it was last year. All right. Let's see. The next place I think the next place of even mentioning is under 9445, which is our purchase services. This is a detailed account. We have Jay, you can speak to this. We have a contract with the attorneys Smith and Rogers that we use every single day. Every officer in their 24-hour service that they provide us, and that's a tremendous asset. But that what we did in that account that went up $5,000 for that service to $22,000, and we moved some money. What did we end up doing? We ended up dropping that
We
account.
took 5 out of the confidential funds and
Yeah.
had it there, so it's only like a $500 difference from what it
That's
was last
our
year.
vice narcotics guys were using $20,000 to buy for informal buying drugs, and we took $5,000 out of that, which is in that same fund, and that basically made up the difference for paying Smith and Rogers. So there was not really a big increase there. Move to line item 9570, which is service contracts. Again, that's a detailed account. I mentioned the one source document scanning, which is a $52,000 one-time expense there. And again, that's something that just has to be done, and it's a one-time deal, and they'll scan all the records currently that are being stored that are required for us to do, and that's a heavy expense. Everything else in there is fairly normal or went up at a pace that couldn't be controlled. Moving to 9860 line item, and staying in that same budget, there is a bomb disposal suit. Actually, both of our bomb suits are at least a year to 2 years out of their recommended life expectancy, and there's a recommendation to replace one of those. We're going to purchase the other one out of asset forfeiture money so we can go ahead and get both of those and complete those suits out. We just got a grant in the last year or two for a new robot that you may or may not be aware of, that we've used just about every SWAT call and every bomb call we go on. And it was $250,000, and we were instrumental in getting a lot of help through emergency management of getting that paid for through grant and asset forfeiture money. We also have just recently sent our guys to get some work done on it in Tennessee. While they were there, they got $15,000 worth of night vision stuff acquired and put on through that company. So anyway, that's some extra mileage that we got without having to look to the budget. Again, I go to patrol cars, 9863, and those are motor vehicles. We have a maintenance of 10 patrol cars a year. Keep in mind, we have worked with 100,000, your ordinance of 100,000 miles on our patrol vehicles for a number of reasons. That seemed to have always been the number at which those cars were best to take off a line because of the speeds that they run at, the terrains that they run on, and the volatility of calls that they're on. We have worked with Mike and the staff to say that we feel like we could get a little bit more out of those, so we'll be talking to you about raising that number. The reason I say that is because if we were living within what you have set now as part of the ordinance, we'd have 19 cars to replace right now that are already over 100,000, that we feel like that we can take 10, replace those, keep these other 9, move them around in places where we don't put a lot of high miles on cars and make this work. I think with cars, I mean, we have about 100 cars in our fleet. And out of those 100 cars, I think that if you did the math, doing 10 a year on your maintenance schedule, then you would have a life, each of those cars would be 10 years old, which is very difficult in this world to operate. So we have done a real good job of working with the staff to only request 10 and 12 cars a year to keep those maintained and moving them around. So anyway, that's the top 10 that you see, and then you move down and there's 3 more. We separated those out because, again, those go with the 6 positions that we've requested. They'll need at least 3 cars, and they can share those cars. So again, we separated those out in case those positions weren't approved. If not, then those cars would be separated from the 10 that will go and maintain the normal fleet. Then you come down and you see 2 more patrol cars, two lines down from that, and again, those are 2 cars. Again, if we do the 2-2 match for Midland, they'll purchase 2 cars, and we'll buy 2 cars for the 2 that we provide down there. So again, assuming that will take place, those are put in a separate place, and if they didn't take place, then we don't want those to be part of the 10 that we'll take to maintain. So it makes it easier for you to look in there and see how it's 10, 3, and 2 as opposed to just 15 put out there. We also have, the last thing I'll touch on is, well, I'll get to that in the next budget. But any questions about that sheriff's budget? All right. Moving to the jail. The jail and animal control, there's very little change in each of those. In fact, the jail budget, $10,621,000 last year, and it's $10,766,000 for an increase of $144,000. Actually, it was a deficit of $144,000 because of if you go outside of the COLA, there's $246,000 that's recommended in the COLA, which is not operational cost for us. But then, let's see, no new personnel. The food contract, we were instrumental in saving $100,000 in this request. Last year's amount was $958,000, and we have beat them up again and got $100,000 more. I feel like we can do it for $100,000 cheaper next year for $858,000 savings there. Minor technology, which is 9342, went up just a hair. Service contracts went up just a little bit, and that's basically we're classification system in our jail, and we're enhancing it. And then another one that the food contract and the medical contract are two services that we have to really keep an eye on. And Southern Health Partners provides our medical contract. They went up 5% this year, and honestly, we got them in and spent a lot of time talking to them about why 5% at one time. Well, they've spent a couple years of not going up at all and working with us, and honestly, we have a very lean contract with them. So that increase of $32,000 for them to cover the CPI for Consumer Price Index for the last couple of years seems to be very, very fair. So it appears that the food contract decrease pretty much covers the increase and then some that we have in that budget. So there's just very little in change in the jail budget. That's all I have that is a total difference. Any questions that y'all have about the jail budget?
Chair?
Yes,
if- Just hit your budget highlights. The board's not, they don't have the line
Oh,
item
okay.
budgets in front of them.
Oh, okay.
That'll help you speed up a little bit, but yeah, what
I
you're telling them is
apologize.
good information, but they don't have it in front of them. So
Okay.
if you can just hit your highlights and then we'll go from there.
Okay. All right, animal control is the last one. Again, it was a very small increase from $798,000 last year's budget to $892,000 this year. And most of that was COLA, again, for salaries. We did put some, without going to each line item now, just to try to talk about where some of those increases were. We added an emergency vet. We noticed that in the last couple of years, we don't have an emergency vet for the 5 canines that we have, and we've had to provide services to those canines from time to time. So now we have that service, and that was an increase there. Let's see. We're replacing 2 new trucks. That was the biggest increase in that budget. We have a number of trucks, again, that are at or over the allotted mileage, and we haven't added any. We did add one truck or 2 trucks through General Services. Kyle Billifer greatly helped us get that done, but we haven't added but only those vehicles in the last 3 or 4 years. So now they came to us, and we've got like 6 of them that are up near the 100,000 miles, and we have looked at, again, stretching those out because we can get many more miles out of those before we really need to trade them out. They put less on those than we do on our patrol squads sometimes. So, again, we're looking to replace 2 of those now that are in need of being replaced. And we'll probably look to replace 2 more of those in next year's budget too, just to kind of stay on that and get that spread out a little bit. But that's where the majority of those are $28,000 apiece for to make up the majority of the increase for the animal control budget. We also keep a lot of things out there. You'll see in there we have a request for a covered garage. Again, we need to address that at some point and finding a place to park and place some of our specialty vehicles, SWAT truck, bomb truck. Those things they need a lot of trickle charging and things like that. So when you get them, the batteries are ready. We also have a lot of equipment that are in those that require that. We also have a iron corral or steel corral that we have to keep for larger animals through animal control. We have golf carts and different things, all kinds of different equipment like that we have to find places, and it ends up at animal control out and around there in that area. So they have recommended a lot of that equipment is sitting out in the sun and the rain now, and they've requested this $2,000 cover shed or it's not enclosed, but it's just a cover to kind of get that stuff in. But, you know, sometimes that can pose a question as to why in the world would you need a shed, and that's what it's for. That's it.
Tell me about the emergency vet. Is that somebody you just contract with for a certain number of hours per month, or how does that work?
It gives us the availability of, now, when you say there's two different emergency vets, one of them that I was talking about a while ago was for our animals. We have, five different dogs?
Six.
Six different dogs now, 2 drug dogs, 2 bloodhounds, and 2 bomb dogs. And if they get sick, or if they need any kind of services or whatnot, this allows us money within that budget to be able to go and get that service provided to them.
Yeah, so you're charged on a per-call basis.
Mhm.
It's not a,
That's correct.
Gotcha.
And we have used about this amount of money. If we don't
Yeah.
use it, then we don't lose it.
right. Great, thank you.
We also, the reason I said that is because within that animal control budget, we also have, I think it's $5,000 or $5,500 that we pay for emergency service to Dr. Hariff, which is basically our doctor that oversees our drugs and also is available for investigations for emergency situations.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Do y'all want to take another break? We have in the schedule to take a break, otherwise we can just let them get set up and keep going. Is there a preference? Okay. If you want to go ahead and set up.
Are you sure I have to come out?
Yes, come on. Get the share.
I hope my stomach doesn't land on the wall.
You the only one coming up, or?
For now.
Because I'm gonna get.
Okay. Okay, the next thing you have on your agenda is Human Services, and these guys are going to go through briefly what hit the highlights, what's happening, what are the impacts coming from the state and federal government, and then also their personnel requests. So if you guys want to go ahead and start.
All right, good evening, thank you. We have a brief PowerPoint presentation that we thought we would use to hit the highlights of what's the major factors driving our budget in the upcoming fiscal year. We wanted to start with just a couple departmental strategies. We've had a lot of good successful partnerships this year. We want to continue to work to maintain those partnerships going forward and hopefully expand and build on additional partnerships. We are been very fortunate and worked very closely, of course, with Londa and Active Living to, as we've gone through the consolidation, we've had a lot of good success there and been very pleased with that. The Health Alliance, Cardinal Innovations, we have some special projects going on with them. The Health Alliance, we're looking at the Triple P parenting program that we're using within our child welfare system. And then with Cardinal Innovations, we're trying to develop a evidence-based treatment for our children in child protective services and in-home services, as well as foster care. We're looking to develop that program further with them as well. We, of course, have gone through some major reorganizations to improve service delivery and cost efficiency over the past year or so. We've done a lot of reallocation, a lot of reclassifications to help meet our needs without increasing our budget. And we've had a lot of success there, again, too, with the aging consolidation. That's been very successful for we've been able to basically take positions and blend them and combine them and have people that were doing just one very specialized function in the past. Now they're now doing 3 and 4 functions, and we've just had a lot of good success there and with that, and we've been very pleased with that. We've reallocated a lot of Tricia's up here because she's taken on a lot of new programs. We've reallocated with her needs in economic services. We reallocated the energy program to her. That while it added an additional program to her this past year, it gave her additional resources to help with the ongoing demand that they've had. So that's been a good thing there as well too. We'll go to the next slide and just, again, hitting some enhancements there. These are pretty self-explanatory. The biggest one that I would feature on this has, again, been our CRC that we have been starting to pilot. Kathy Maurer has been a big leader in that effort, and we are really starting to see more people come on board. They had a very successful community event, I believe, last week, and hopefully we'll be getting more and more community providers on board with the Community Resource Connection and really growing that. But these, again, are just some efforts that we've made over the past year to, and consolidation, again, as well, too, the physical location for transportation has been big, as well as bringing the aging services staff down. To hit just a couple of performance things, we've had some very proud of our success in child support. Angela Talley, who's back here, is the division child support director or administrator. And as you can see, they have achieved some very successful outcomes. They've met all of their incentive goals and have actually achieved a top 10 rating in 3 collection goals, which we're very, very proud of them. They have just performed at an unbelievable level. And in this economy, that's really something that's to be proud of. We had successful participation rate in our Work First program each month of the past year, which is a federal requirement that we have to meet. And we've been very successful in meeting that participation rate each month. Very proud of that. We have, again, I talked a little bit earlier about the consolidation of energy, and of course the child care programs and economic services. Child daycare moved to Trish's area as well too. So I really piled a lot on to Trish this past year. But these programs are really economic service oriented. They're eligibility oriented programs. So it seemed more natural for them to be within that division since they're working so close together as a unit anyway. So it made a lot of sense, and we've had a lot of good consolidation there and really showing some success there as well too. Child care was rough this year because we did have to go through a reduction in services plan because our allocation came in a lot less than where we were spending at. So we had to reduce some services, but we got the services back into place and hopefully are set up in good shape for next year, because that will be one of our budget drivers there, is potential cuts to that program. And I talked a little bit about the Triple P parenting program that we've done and the program that we're doing with Cardinal Innovations to help in our child welfare area. Very hopeful that those are going to be some good services coming our way. And one other thing that we always like to be proud of is that we were able to claim all of our federal grants, which is good because that keeps us in our revenue projections. One of our goals is to make sure we maximize our federal allocations so that we minimize the cost of the county as best we can, and we were able to do that this year. And we've performed very well in audits, both at the county audit and at state reviews as well too. This is one of the big ones, is our budget drivers this year. We did discuss with you about the child support legal fees that may be potentially coming our way. I think there's been some progress maybe on that that they won't impact us, but of course we've discussed that with you. That is a big one. The sequester is obviously another big one. We receive several federal grants that are allocations: Social Services Block Grant, the Child Care Developmental Block Grant, the TANF Temporary Assistance to Needy Families. That's another block grant that we get. And those are all projected to have as much as 8% cuts in them next year. Now, there's a lot of negotiations going on right now with the state to try to fund some of these cuts at the state level. If you want to hold your breath for that, you're welcome to. I'm not really holding my breath for it. We are probably planning on seeing some reductions in our grants. We have not received the final numbers, though, however. Of course, obviously, the state is going to wait until they get through their budget as well, too. But the sequester is obviously a big impact, potentially, to our budget. Training needs within child welfare. We have undergone a lot of challenges in child welfare this year, especially in our foster care area. We have basically been rebuilding this unit from the ground up. And when you rebuild, you start over with a lot of new personnel. And we basically have no staff person in that unit right now that has more than a year of service in foster care with us. So we have identified some training needs that we want to try to meet in this area, as well as child welfare in general, because training is critical in child welfare to keep the workers up to date on the best practices and the policies to make sure we're providing the best services that we can in all areas of child welfare, but obviously some of our focus is going to be in foster care with the rebuilding that we're doing there as well, and trying to address some of the deficiencies that we've had in that area. Foster care, again, comes back up in terms of growth. We have been really filing a lot of petitions over the last 2 years. They've been up more with taking children into care to provide them safety from abuse and neglect. We're projecting 100 children potentially coming into care next fiscal year, which is up from about, I think we projected about 70 last year. So we are just seeing the numbers really grow. 2 to 3 years ago, we were as low as 48 foster children, but now we're up to over about 75 children with more petitions to come. So we're seeing definite growth there, and of course with that comes definite cost that we have to absorb. Increase in new positions, we'll cover that in a minute, but we do have several new positions in our budget, as you've already seen. And North Carolina FAST, this is the system that is economic services, new big savior for us in terms of helping us do our jobs better. Although right now, Trish and myself and all of her staff are about to bang our heads through the wall with it because it's just been such a challenge. But part of the process that we have to go through is what's called converting cases, basically. And basically that's just taking the old cases out when they're due for a recertification and putting them into the new system. And that takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of manpower. So we are requesting some temporary help in our budget to help us convert cases quicker so that we can move cases along faster. We are behind in our recertifications with food and nutrition right now is where North Carolina FAST is at, but it's coming to Medicaid in October. I believe we'll be going live with Medicaid in October. So that is a big need that we have because our staff alone just cannot do it, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. So we're asking for some temporary help there. So those are some of the big drivers that we have in our budget. The personnel changes that we're asking for, again, most are personnel requests. Most of our requests are based on the fact of just increased demand in services. They are in 2 primary areas, of course, in Trish's area. Our goal was to try to get our caseloads down to about a 600 per worker level. Right now, they're very close to about a 700 level. And that's, if you can imagine managing 700 cases, it's quite a bit on our staff. And that, coupled with the conversion in North Carolina FAST, it's been a rough time for them. So we initially had a request, I believe, for about 19 positions based on a strategic plan that they underwent with the staff and with supervisors to design the most ideal system that we would have to provide the best possible services in this area. I think we ended up with about, I can't remember, about 8 positions, I believe, total that we talked about. These positions are a wide array of positions. There are a couple that are supervisory because, again, oversight and supervision is critical in this area as well, too. We have supervisors right now supervising 10 to 12 workers with over 6,000 cases. That's a lot, and there's going to be things that are missed. So we wanted to try to reduce the supervisor-worker ratio and, again, get the workers' caseloads down as well, too. So that was the strategy that we did was based on a plan to hit certain benchmarks to hopefully allow our staff to not feel quite so overwhelmed. The staff in Trish's area, they've been working 60 hours a week, literally, overtime on Saturdays to just try to keep cases moving. Because we're judged and measured in that area based on the timeliness that we get the benefits out. So those position requests are basically due to that increase in caseload that we've seen over the last 2, 3, 4 years. It's been probably a net total of about anywhere from 20 to 30% increase in our caseloads from where they were pre-recession, basically. They are starting to level off, though. That is one good thing. We are starting to see some leveling off, and actually some reductions are, steadiness in it as well. But it's still a high rate of cases compared to where we were. The other positions are within the child welfare area, and again, too, this is based on increase in just literally reports, especially severe reports. Sexual abuse, physical abuse reports. We've been filing more petitions because we're seeing more severity in our reports. And at times we have workers that are over this caseload standard based on the number of reports that are coming in. Just to give you an example, we had 10 reports over the Memorial Day holiday weekend that we had to accept 9 of, and that's a lot, and that's just the trend that we've been seeing, unfortunately. There's no rationale, rhyme or reason. You could probably attribute 3 or 4 things to the increased reports, but it's there. And we had wanted to look at both on-call and line staff in terms of helping us to process investigations and get our caseloads right. I think we requested 3 initially. I think we have 2. One of these positions, though, is a position that was in our budget. It was a contract position. We're just bringing it into our area, and then the other one is a new position. So they both are new positions, but one was a contract that we're converting back. So we will, assess where that best need is for that new position. Will it be on call? Will it be on the staff? We'll just have to look at where we're at to determine that. And most likely will be an on-call regular worker on the floor that will do that. So other than that, I believe those were our new position requests, the driving factors in that, and that's the reasons why we requested it. The last chart here is, I always like to do a pie chart to give you a little look at what we're seeing. And when we did this, of course, there's been the old adage that the county match has grown every year in social services for the last 20 years, and that is true. When I first came into social services back in 1991, county matches were probably more around, I would say, 10 to 20%, but now they're getting close to half in some counties. And as you can see, based on rough estimates that we did, we have about a 41% match in our budget that's county dollars. Some of the funds that we get, some of the revenues we get are capped allocations. Some are open-ended, so it just depends on where you're spending your money at. Of the non-county, as you can see on the chart, 84% of that reimbursement we get is estimated to be federal funds, with about the 15.999% being state, and we get a little bit of grant money as well. So you can see that the state does not have a lot of money in our budget. They have absolutely, I don't want to say absolutely nothing, but they have very few dollars in Tricia's budget. There's a little bit of expansion money, I think, that we get from the state to fund her staff, but her staff are pretty much funded by the federal government. Angela and child support, they're the same way. The state has very little to no money in their budget as well. The state primarily has money in, of course, they have it in Medicaid, and we do claim some Medicaid dollars, and then they have it in some allocations that we get for services, especially in Kathy's area with adult services, and then within child protective or child welfare services. But again, it's a fixed amount. It's not an open-ended pot, so it's a very limited amount of money. The federal government, we claim each month, we claim our expenses to the state, and then we get reimbursed based on the expenses that we have, based on the services we've provided. So that gives you a little quick snapshot of what our funding streams look like in terms of our budget. But that's a quick, brief highlight of what's driving our budget and our personnel request, and where we're at going forward. We have tried to, always work very closely with the county to present a very responsible budget. And we were very proud of the fact that the last 3 years we actually were able to reduce our budget over time. But I think the needs and the demands of the services that we've seen have caught up to us, and we are in a situation where some new positions are needed, and we're having to experience a little bit of expansion. But again, too, going forward, especially in Tricia's area with North Carolina FAST, should we be able to get successful implementation and that program work the way it's envisioned to work, we can perhaps, come down back to the table later and hopefully be saying, well, we might not need as many staff here because the system is working the way it needs to work. That's always the goal, and we'll always be assessing that as well, too. I know Tricia's probably saying, shut up, don't say that. But that's the vision of the program, is to help us be more efficient. We're just not there yet, and it's probably will be a while before we get there.
Any questions?
Yes. Going back to my page 78 in the bottom right, is one page before this. In the personnel changes, is it the recommendation that DSS adds 301 positions or 11?
It's 11.
Okay, that,
Wait.
yeah.
To add 11 positions.
To add 11.
Bring it up to 301.
That
last section
that's what I
is
want to
the
make
change
certain
of
is that.
positions, yeah.
We tried to ask for 301 positions, but Mike shot that down pretty quick.
Okay. Cardinal Innovations, Tell us about Cardinal Innovations. Are they responsive? Are they are they dealing with y'all, working with DSS effectively and efficiently?
Yes, I mean, I would say they are. In fact, we meet with the directors in the region that Cardinal serves. We meet with Anna on a quarterly basis, so we get constant feedback and communication there. Again, we've been doing 2 or 3 pilot projects with them, and we approached them recently about offering some more parenting, helping to expand our parenting classes that we need for our families in foster care, or the parents in foster care. They've been very responsive to that. The challenge that we get at times, the biggest challenge we probably have is placement of children in our care in facilities, mental health facilities across the state based on the level of need. That can be a challenge at times, but they are always at the table and always trying to work with us there. So yes, I can report favorably. We have an excellent working relationship with them.
Okay. Tricia, y'all's caseload is about $700 per staff member,
Yes.
thereabouts.
Roughly.
What made it get to that number?
Economic growth, program policy changes. There have been some waivers that North Carolina has sought and gained, which allows more folks to be eligible. So we're seeing a sort of a driver of diverse populations being eligible now, where before maybe they weren't.
Okay, that's the nice way to say it. The reality is that the definitions for allowing people to receive benefits has expanded.
Some, yes, for sure. With the waivers that North Carolina has sought, the federal government has expanded eligibility, and this has been going on for quite a few years. It's not just this year, but it's just sort of coming to a head. Without additional positions, we just can't sustain ourselves at the level we've been working.
Now, why is it important to get it down to a level of approximately 600 cases per worker?
Well, our goal used to be 500. We sat down, as Ben said, we had a strategic planning session. We went to retreat, the supervisors met, we looked at what technology has to offer, and we are hoping that a caseload of 600 per worker is manageable with an NC-FAST system that Ben spoke about. We're right now going through the heartache and heartburn of implementation of that program, but hopefully by this time next year, we'll be in a little bit better spot, as most of my staff will have been through the conversion period. So we're thinking 600 per worker with the additional staff requests that we've been approved for through the county manager, and which we hope you guys will approve. We're still not going to get to 600. So what we're going to have to do is hope that some of the reorganization things we're doing, we're taking some frontline staff and training them on policy. We're moving some staff around. We're hoping that at the level we're going to be at with 2 additional workers and some training and the technology, that we'll be at about depending on growth, we're looking at about 650 per worker, even with the additional staff. And that's at a stable growth. If we, increase, we're certainly not going to be at 650.
And part of the challenge, TJ, is that the state really doesn't have a recommended caseload standard. So we are basing that on our own assessment. Ideally, we would like it to be a lot lower, honestly, because we've seen a high degree of turnover in economic services, and some of that has been due to that caseload size and the demands that we have. NC-FAST is supposed to help us become more of a generic program. In other words, 1 worker, 1 case, all services. That's the goal of it. If we can get to that point, it may be, we feel like we could probably, each worker could probably handle 600 if the system will work properly and work with the speed that it's supposed to work at. We've had speed issues with North Carolina FAST and conversion
North Carolina
issues.
FAST is an abysmal program. It was set out and it was presented to the Department of Social Services to be a savior in time, and it's expended more time, and it doesn't work. It's abysmal. Let's call it what it is. So it's increasing your workload and your responsibilities. My question is, with the coding, because the staff is doing coding on services that are being provided, in essence. And when we're talking about 700 cases, they're having to code work that's being done to assist people, is that correct?
Per worker, yes.
Right.
We're talking about almost 30,000 Medicaid recipients and about 22,000 individuals who receive food and nutrition services. And between that, you're looking at families, so they have 700 cases per worker, and that's not individuals. NC-FAST will take us to an individual keystroke, whereas now we're looking at a case. So work may vary, and with Medicaid, right now we're only in food nutrition, and in food nutrition, when you have an error, whether it's right or wrong, the client has to repay that, whether we're at fault or they're at fault. The client, because they got dollars they can use at the grocery store, and they have to repay those. Just like if you got too much money in your bank, you would have to repay the bank even if it was their fault, if they gave you too much money. But with Medicaid, if we do something wrong and a client receives a benefit in error, they get a surgery or they go into nursing care, that is a county responsibility if we screw up, so basically. And so with 30,000 recipients, 700 cases, it could be astronomical. Healthcare is not decreasing. So we're very concerned about the volume of work staff has.
So let's get this right. Now, we're talking about a procedure. So not only is the county having to fund that procedure, but there's also a penalty for making that error.
Yes, if we make the error and the client gets a benefit, let's say they have a surgery during the time of our incorrect, eligibility determination. And
But
we've seen
there's
a few of those, unfortunately.
But there's a penalty on top of repayment.
There is the penalty of paying the claim.
That's the penalty in Medicaid.
Okay.
There actually is.
So the importance is trying to, not that y'all are not requesting it because you're not getting things right now. The concern is with the volume, the likelihood of making a mistake, a keystroke error, increases.
Right. And the volume, we're already not meeting the state standard for timeliness, and eventually, in the old days, we had Alexander Flaherty, and the state would call the county every day and say, you have a case that didn't get processed. Go ahead and cut a check for $650. And you had to do that. Well, we don't want to get back to those days, but that is always a potential that if you don't meet your time frames, that the state or a client will file a lawsuit, and then we're right back to that as well.
And when we say 700 cases or 600 cases, remember that does not include new applications that come in that workers have to work up, and then the recertifications and changes that are made during the course of time as well too. So the 700 cases is basically a part of what they do. New applications are a huge part of what they do as well too.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Any other questions? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, the next thing that we have is for some general comments or discussion items that would benefit staff based on if we want to at this time, on any of the presentations today. And I guess, Commissioner White, I just ask, I know that you previously served on the DSS board, so, and Commissioner Meismer is the other one that currently serves on there, so I would expect both of you to have more information on DSS than I would, because, I haven't served on their board, so, any general comments you want to make about I'm just wondering if you were asking questions to justify the 11 new positions, or
that's the thing
where
is
you were
that,
kind of going.
One thing that we can't lose sight of the fact is when you're talking about caseload that's going up from 600 to 700, or not going up, it's already at 700, there's a tremendous amount of pressure to make certain those keystrokes are done correct. The problem is when you have that, and then you have other new people coming in, and then you have to try and handle all that, that's a tremendous amount of stress and pressure. And if there is a keystroke error that's completely unintentional, it's going to be quite costly to the county. And frankly, I'm surprised that there hasn't been more of an issue with that in the past. And Department of Social Services are very kind talking about the benefits of NC Fast. I have yet to hear anybody say anything good about it, about that is not associated with our county department. I mean, so I've been told it's abysmal. It's not what they were supposed to. It's not doing what it's supposed to be rolled out to do, and you know, I just wonder where they're getting the programmers on the state level, because they don't know what they're doing. But so that, you know, I would strongly urge us to provide these workers that they're requesting in regards to the economic services, because they just get inundated, and again, they're being kind about what's happening. The definition of recipients has increased dramatically, and that has caused an uptick. It has not been defined broader this year by the new administration in Raleigh, but in past administrations it has, and that's what's added to the caseload as well. So that I think we'd be short-sighted. Well, what is it, a penny wise and a pound foolish in regards to this if we do not do that with economic services.
So are you good with the 8?
I'm good with the 8. I'd like to see where we are right now, and you know, hopefully there'll be some geniuses that get beamed in by Scotty to Raleigh and to program NC Fast better, but I don't think that's going to happen.
I mean, they actually requested 15. That's kind of,
you know,
and
I would
it's-
wait and see. I think we wait and see how it goes. You know, I really think it is. I think I'd like to see what they're, you know, Mr. Rose and his staff have done a tremendous job in trying to get the most and become very efficient with what they're doing. So I'd still keep it at 8 right now.
Excuse me, Mr. White, are you also in favor of reinstating the position we deleted in error?
Yes.
Thank you.
And he was just keying in on the 8. I think you were at agreements for the whole, for the 11 that are in the
Oh
county
yeah,
managers.
yes. I'm in 11, but I'm really keying in on the
Yeah.
8.
But you're in favor, and I'm in favor of the 11 that the county
Yeah.
manager has suggested too. I'll say this in a nice way, I've been a victim of technology from Raleigh. So not this particular one, but some reason that you can't quite figure out if there are 100 counties that you need enough servers to handle all of them, and everybody seems to have the same deadline. So it's amazing to me that we can't still get quite past that. Hey, we also talked about the sheriff's budget. I made a comment to Commissioner White, I'll just share this, that I think I have it easy because most of the boards that I serve on don't ask us for money. I'm on WASAC, they don't ask for money. I'm on the MPO, they don't come here for money because we don't do roads. You know, so I have it pretty easy. You guys are ones that serve on committees that tend to have more needs and maybe more details to kind of work through. So I have to rely on your suggestions and expertise in these different areas. So, any questions about the sheriff's budget or any comments that anybody wants to make on that?
I thought I had a good feel for the budget until he started going through line items in 9470, and so I got to go back and look and see.
And I don't think we have a copy of that. So we do need to get a copy of the sheriff's. I think he did this last year too, if I remember correctly. So we need to make sure that we get a copy of his line item so that if he's going to give it to us, we might as well be able to read through it and see what he gave us.
I thought I had a better understanding about these 11 positions, and then when he started talking about the four patrol positions and then 6 additional positions, and then, so I got to go back and look at it to.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to make sure everybody understood, that for Midland, there's 4 positions in there, 2 of which will be funded by Midland, correct? So we would be funding 2. Hey, they're all in our budget because they're going to give us the money for 2 of the 4. And that provides them with 24-hour, 7-day-a-week coverage by adding those 4 positions. And then again, the telecommunicators, the 911 operators, that's going to become a civilian workforce, and the deputies will then be put on patrol to help cover those areas. And then, obviously, I think the records clerk kind of spoke for itself as far as that goes, with the increase in the demand for permits and carry and conceal permits.
That's where I got confused. If the law enforcement positions are moving from communications out, he was talking about 10 patrol positions. There's 10 patrol positions, but,
And
Well-
one person to take care of the,
Yeah,
so
he
I
needs-
just need to go back and,
Composed of 4 for Midland and 6 for,
Right, but we have in the budget is telecommunicators. Right now,
I understand.
the majority of that staff in the communication center is sworn officers. This will there are some civilians in there, this will put 6 civilians in there, move 6 sworn officers out to go into the streets.
And that's what I understood until he started talking today and asking for 10 additional patrol positions.
When
So
they-
I just need to go back through the
Right.
budget and I want to get it.
Well, their original request was patrol officers.
Mhm.
And I had discussions with the sheriff and with Chief Hunt, and others, and making recommendations to try to move in that direction, to civilianize the 911 center and take advantage of the sworn officers in the areas out in the field.
Well, I want to reconcile with what he was saying with
Sure.
what we have in our budget
Mhm.
before I have more questions,
Right.
or at least more comments.
Okay.
I would just mention that I thought he did a good job of giving us facts and figures about the Midland situation and serving as liaison to that board. They have discussed that quite a bit. I think we've talked about it a bit before. They had quite a few citizens that showed up at one of their board meetings to express their opinions about it as well. So I think that is a good thing that they receive that service, same as the other municipalities that we have that arrangement with. And I think they are pleased that we have that in the budget.
Yeah, and Mayor Kitts mentioned to me about just 2427 being such a nice road. You know, it's very easy to come into Cabarrus County, do something you shouldn't do, and run back one direction or the other.
Exactly.
And so that was a one of the things she mentioned to me in another meeting about why they needed those officers. And it's, you know, it is leveraging for us if they pay for 2 and we pay for 2.
Right.
And like you said, we've done it with Mount Pleasant and Harrisburg, I think, haven't we?
Yes, ma'am.
how many does Harrisburg have?
Harrisburg has, I believe it's 12 total. We fund 2 and they fund 10.
Okay, and then I'm kind of as you can tell, I'm going in reverse order. As far as the overview of the operating budget, is there anything that came to mind that we need to let Ann know about, to kind of think about? I would like for us to think about the 3 part-time employees and going ahead and putting them on the health care plan. It's, you know, just a little over, it's less than $24,000 to do that, move them up 1 year. And I don't know if they're covered by, they may be covered by a spouse, they may not need it, I don't know, because I don't know who they are, but I'd like some more information on that.
What additional information would you like on those 3 positions? I know who they are.
Yeah, I don't want to know a name. I don't want to know a name, but I want to know a specific position. You know, are they ones that would want to be on our plan, or they don't want to, you know, I mean, in my case, my husband's employed, so he's on his plan, and I'm employed, so I'm on my plan. I would not opt to go on his plan. If that was offered to me, you know, I wouldn't take that one, because I like where we do better separate. So I don't know if these 3 are even ones that want to be on the plan.
2 of them are already on our plan through their spouses, and I'm not sure about the 3rd.
So if spouses were on our plan, then as an employee, then obviously that would be a big savings to the family, because they wouldn't be paying for the extra. It's just something for us to consider.
My question would be, if not for health care reform, would we even be talking about it? So we're only guessing based on what we understand about healthcare. Maybe you understand about healthcare reform better than I do.
Boy, wouldn't that?
So we're just anticipating that's something that we may possibly be required to do.
No, we know the requirement.
know those
And it was
requirements.
because of our plan year starting as a fiscal year, that's why we aren't having, if we were on a calendar year, we would have already had to implement.
Right.
But because we're on a fiscal year and where our plan year begins, we don't start till 7/1 of 14.
Yeah.
Right, it would have been 1/1 of 14, but now it's 7/1 of 14.
If those three part-time persons were on my company payroll, I probably would be looking at ways to consolidate those part-time positions into a single position to avoid that additional $25,000 a year expense.
We have more
that-
part-times now, which are being consolidated. So that's why they've already, isn't that correct? So we're reducing the number of
Right.
part-times we currently have down so that there's only 3 left. And how many employees do we have?
Are they gonna be
Ballpark.
part-time or full-time?
There's still 3 part-time.
Ballpark about
These 3 are part-time and they're 32 hours a week.
So that covers them under healthcare.
Yes, because
It
you have to
would.
exceed 30.
Because they're .9 FTE.
So that's what I mean.
Right.
We're going to have to
Pretty
do it
close.
next year. I'm just making a suggestion that 2 of them are covered already because their spouses are here, that apparently. 1 we don't know about. 1,100 employees, and we're going to be down to 3 that can't get coverage.
Well, that's pretty good odds.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. That's
Yeah.
why. If it were 100, then I wouldn't even mention it. But when I asked and we were down to 3, I'm just saying, I think we should just think about it if that was a change that we would want to do. I think we could afford it. How's that? Anything else that you have? Any other questions of Ann? I asked her about, where's my piece of paper?
Talk about the elections.
Yeah, I asked her about under the one we got for budget summary and revenues for Board of Elections. Under 2013, it only had $100 in there. And she said I thought, now that can't be correct, but it has to do with off-year elections, right?
Right.
So apparently that is not, I thought for sure, I thought I finally caught something that you hadn't gotten right, Parker.
Well, I went and looked, and it's program fees that they budgeted about $100, which, small amounts, but then in an election year, which is the one coming up, that's budgeted, I believe, at $95,000, so that was why there was the huge jump.
Municipal elections are every other year, so you see it every other year. Revenue, no revenue, revenue, no revenue.
I made some notes just to make sure that, some bullet points there. You would like to see the amortization schedule for our CCC?
I don't need to see it, I just need to understand why
Why the increase?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get that. Forrester, need an update on their plans for a relocation. And then also the truck, if we don't get any response, or if it's not a response that the board is comfortable with, then the truck would come out. Q-Scabs subsidies, explanation of what that is and why. Healthcare for the employee, those additional employees. Q-Scab schedule of repayment, or that, and we decided that was 15 years,
We
right?
decided- yeah,
Okay, so we're
that-
good
we
there.
determined that.
Updated school location plan, when is that presentation going to take place? And that's all I've got now for sort of to-do action items to get back for you guys tomorrow.
If you want to, under the CIP that Jonathan went through,
Uh-huh.
I don't need an answer, but I'm not inclined to, I want to know what sort of partnership we're having with Midland in regards to Rob Wallace Park. You know, if we're going to develop it, are they going to take care of the operation expenses 100%?
I can
I mean, that.
I can bring you that proposal that they made a couple
I know
months
what
ago
the
back.
proposal says. I'm just saying is that if we're going to put it, we're buying the land, and that's a significant input, is that at least with the other cities, they have taken over the operational expenses 100%. So that in the CIP, I'm looking at page 50 of our presentation today, it talks about $950,000. I'm not inclined to agree to put $950,000 into that park if we don't have the operational expenses covered. And then the same thing with T.N. Spencer Park is, in regards to a $990,000 investment, is the Boys and Girls Club going to defray some of those expenses? And in regards to, and I think, well, the piggyback on the land for the new elementary school at Cabarrus, that will be addressed when we get an update on that presentation.
So, a couple months ago, we passed on or informed you of Midland's, the town of Midland's proposal of partial payment for 1 year. And so, it sounds to me that that is not a feasible option, that I can report back to them that it's not, that they need to
Well,
request, if that's what the board would choose.
That's my
Sure.
position. I don't know about the other commissioner's position, but we're buying that at a significant cost to the county, and the operational expenses need to be covered, or I think need to be addressed. And I think addressing it at, I think it was about $40,000 for the first year, and then drops down to $30,000, and then zero is roughing it.
And share revenues.
And share revenues. It's just, I don't think I don't think that's fair to the other part of the county. But again, that's my opinion. I don't
Sure.
want to speak for anybody else.
Any other ones that anybody else has questions on? As far as the CIP, I mean, it's a lot to go through the first night. I thought you were getting ready to say something. And you said that we're going to get a recommendation as far as capital reserve, which we have not been putting money aside because of
That's correct.
the way the budget's gone and the economy, that we suspended that policy to move money so that we would have more flexibility, which is one of the reasons we were able to do these one-time projects. I feel certain we're going to talk about some more next fiscal year, one-time projects. And
That's correct.
so that'll be something. I kind of like the way that we were able to do that this year by picking some projects and knowing that we could pay for them. It's kind of nice to be able to do that.
At the June
make an
meeting, we'll
impact.
ask to waive that policy one more time. We were waiting for a lot of information to come from the legislature with the changes that they're making. As we heard from Raleigh last week, concerning lottery, concerning tax reform, lottery affecting our lottery proceeds, tax reform affecting our sales tax, healthcare reform. So hopefully by the time the audit is complete, and we will be able to, in November, December, bring you to actually do make that transfer. But we would like to get a little more information, so we prefer to wait one more time before we do that.
And current projects for 014 are funded with one-time money, so that would be for the future. If we started going into 15 and beyond, we're going to need to replenish that.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, no motion to recess till tomorrow at 4 o'clock. A motion, we have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you all very much.